Subject is fundamentals of mechatronics. Prepare a small circuits using different sensors and actuators. In this, we have to use sensor and actuator, and we need to make one circuit. Practical significance is idea creation and its implementation leads to building the small to medium and medium to large scale applications. Preparing small circuits using sensors and actuators is the initial step towards the building of application oriented competencies. In this, we need to use proper sensors and actuators. Sensors will sense the motion of object or position of object, and the actuator will provide the mechanical motion. After this, student will able to understand and build an circuit using sensors and actuators. Most of the sensors are proximity sensors, can be used for detecting the presence of objects surrounding it without having any physical contact. Basically, this type of sensors are non-contact type sensors. Proper type of proximity sensor should be selected based on the nature of target to be sensed. Limit switch is designed to return the initial position by spring action. Optical sensors are used to detect the presence of light. Examples of optical sensors are photodiode and phototransistors. Okay, we will see one video related to this practical.
This video will explain how you can limit the travel of a linear actuator.
आता हे प्रॉक्सिमिटी सेन्सर्स आहेत आणि हे लिनियर ॲक्च्युएटर आहे. लिनियर ॲक्च्युएटर मोस्टली या एअरवरती ऑपरेट होते.
Without necessarily using inbuilt limit switches, you can get linear actuators with built-in limit switches, but I prefer an external sensor to limit the travel. So just let me show you the components here. There's a 24 volt power supply up here. Then
आता इथून पॉवर सप्लाय दिलेला आहे.
Because the linear actuator is 24 volts, it's quite a powerful power supply. And then starting out here, the 24 volts is converted down to 12 volts in this small little, I think it's about $5, small little regulated power supply. And that gives a nice clean 12 volts to...
This is our breadboard. Breadboard वरती हे सर्किट इम्प्लिमेंट केलेलं आहे. पण मोस्ट ऑफ दी आपल्याला या प्रॅक्टिकलमध्ये प्रॉक्सिमिटी सेन्सर आणि लिनियर ॲक्च्युएटर याचा स्टडी करायचा आहे.
This circuit, which is basically, I think it's an Arduino kit actually, but it's $4 or $5 that is an opto-isolated 4-relay board, and basically you can have the triggers. If I point to these, you can have it negative edge triggered or positive edge triggered. So basically that means that if the voltage reduces, then it can trigger, or if a voltage increases, it can trigger. And that's important for this because I'm using triggers based on these proximity sensors here, and of course they will go high or low. Okay, but I'll explain that in a bit more detail in a moment. So basically this board is just taking the inputs from some proximity sensors and then turning on some relays, which are then coming over to this board, controlling the DC motor, the linear actuator control board. And again, these are fairly cheap. I think this was $10 or $15. And it's a remote control. Here's the remote control. There's a little remote control, up and down buttons. But basically this is a cheap and easy way of controlling a linear actuator. It's got a power supply, and then 2 wires go off to the linear actuator, and it handles all the reversing. And you can actually see in the wiring diagram here, the power here, and then the linear actuator goes across the motor terminals. And then if you do connect them, these are limit switch connections here on the board. And I'm obviously using those because I'm using the proximity sensors as limit switches for this motor. And you can see that I've just pushed a bolt through there. And then if you can see on the actual PC printed circuit board here, you can have interlock. If you put these switches here, look, these dip headers here, you can set this board to be interlocked, which means it will run continuously rather than being in a kind of a jog mode, which means you keep your button on it to run the motors. And this means it's going to wait for an interlock. It's going to wait for these switches to tell the linear actuator circuit when to stop. So I'll just go back to the proximity sensors. So the proximity sensors will obviously sense the presence of some material, and that could be a hand or a bolt or metal or plastic or even water. And then signals will come down here into these blue wires. Now all I've done is I've just put 100k resistors each side. So actually these pins would kind of, in an equilibrium situation, they'd just kind of sit around 6 volts, i.e. there's a 100k resistor there, a 100k resistor there, and then I've done this so it doesn't really matter if I use a PNP or an NPN proximity sensor. I can just put anything in, really, because the board is sensing a voltage change up or down. Okay, and you'll notice I've got only 2 circuits are active here. You can see the blue wires triggering, and the blue wires are the signal wires from the proximity sensors. And the reason I've done that is so the relays aren't on when when my linear actuator is up, just for this particular application. So at the moment, you can see from the LEDs that both of these relays are active at the moment, but the linear actuator is actually static in the down position. Okay, and when I put the linear actuator up, you'll notice that, I'll just show you it going up, traversing up. You'll notice that if I do the same thing again, bring it down, you notice one of the relays is active. In the down position, they're both active, which is it's not normally in that state when it's down in my case. But when it's up, with my lid is closed, it basically means that the relays aren't sitting there in the sun all day getting warm. Okay, so both relays are off.
आता यामध्ये बघा, इथे हे 2 सेन्सर्स लावले आहेत आणि या पॉइंटची जी काही पोझिशन आहे, जी मोशन आहे, ही फक्त या 2 पॉइंटमध्येच राहील असं सर्किट इथे बनवलं आहे.
Off at the moment. Okay, so if we go onto the motor controller, again you can see the wiring diagram, and as I go up and down, you can see that the interlocks LEDs are appearing. I'll do that again for you so you can see the LEDs. Okay, there we go. And back down again. Now, of course, I can put these proximity sensors anywhere in the travel, and it gives a very repeatable. It gives a very